Hi there, it's actually good to be back in my hometown, London. I've lived in California for a number of years working for Intel. Traveled many countries, probably hit about 40 countries a year in this World Ahead job. So I want to give you some of the flavors there of what we see and try and fit that into where some of the technology is going as well. So run a program called the World Ahead, and we believe there's 4 premises which are absolutely critical in any market and very critical in the education market. And so we try and work on these. One of them is computers or computing devices, whether they be handheld devices, whether they be these smaller devices or the full function laptops and desktops. And increasingly, what we're seeing is the design of these for specific functions. We're seeing healthcare devices that we do in the UK for the National Health Service that are rugged, that you can wipe with disinfectant. I've just come back from China. We're looking at farmers' PCs where easy reset button, TV display out for cost and sharing across community centers, and low-cost rugged laptops for children where you may use flash memory, other types of memory, but increasingly segmentation of devices. You'll see. The second piece of this is they must be connected to internet, needs to be broadband. Historically, that's been DSL in most countries, increasingly becoming Wi-Fi, and to enable more of the future technologies. We're obviously doing things to make 3G run very well in the computers, and going forward, make WiMAX a standard in them as well. So all of the connection, and in this, the telcos and the cable people, the big partners, and I'll show you an evolution of this in a second. In education, we believe that this is about 21st century skills. This is part of our philanthropy group in Intel. We have trained, we spend tens of millions of dollars on this a year, and we've trained about 4 million teachers around the world. We've talked about how we'll train 10 million by 2011, so a little bit ahead of you, 2012. But you would tell me there's 60 million teachers in the world. Can you apply the programs to the rest of them? And I'll talk a little bit about that. And the last one is content. Content runs across many platforms. You saw this in the BBC conversation, runs on handheld devices, runs on full-scale computers. We do a lot of work on enabling that. Again, this is one of the activities that we do as enabling so we can bring more platforms to the marketplace, work with the software companies, work with the content companies, work with folks like BBC, and even bring some of our own capability like School, where school.com.uk is one of the prevalent websites that's running interactive maths and science content that we've helped develop. So try and work across all of these, and all of these are going to evolve going forward. Now, we're a platform company, so I want to give you a few things about platform technology and where it's going. And I think if you look at this slide, there's 3 basic messages to take out of this. Number 1 is, looking forward, there's going to be children in schools or older ones in universities that have multiple devices. You saw this in both of the prior presenters. I'll say exactly the same. The content has to run on all of these. You care about convergence, and they're going to have multiple devices depending on their function, their capability, their affordability, what they're trying to do. The second thing is connection has to be pervasive. We've had laptops inside Intel for the last 8 years, standard for everyone. And I can't remember, I visit 40 countries a year, and I reckon it's 4 years or 5 years since I've used a dial-up in this, since Centrino came out. Just don't use it, and always get email in whatever countries I go to. So what we work on these platforms is the easiness of the communication and the interoperability. You'll have laptops that in the school may work on the LAN, increasingly work on Wi-Fi. When the kids are at home, they may be using a 3G connection capability or a 4G, whatever the wireless is, and at the same time, learn over time that we'll build WiMAX in these platforms. We'll make it standard. The same chips will use both Wi-Fi and WiMAX. One chip does both. And work on the communication managers so you can go from connection seamlessly. It's getting easier. It's got a long way to go because the kids will use Wi-Fi in school, 3G at home, WiMAX somewhere else. That connection managers, those interoperability is key. The third thing on this slide to take away is power. We really made a fundamental change in listening and execution in the last few years, and you saw it come to market about a year ago. with the core processor. What that did for us is it converged our whole family of processors. And I'll give you a couple of data points you care about. Again, I've just spent a week in China, and 2 years ago, the benchmarks for desktop processors was 100 watts. The benchmarks last year for desktop processors was 65 watts. We just got certified with the new core at 35 watts. That's a 3x reduction. Now, we spent our life trying to take the desktop chips and a year later get the same capability in mobile by mobilizing them and putting the power management in. Doesn't work going forward. Early next year, our volume of laptops crosses over desktops, and seeing that coming changed the design methodology, so we designed for laptops first, get that same capability in desktops, and put the same capability in servers, so you can handle these big server farms that the Googles have that will take all these web hits that are going in there. But laptops designed first. And to give you a couple of proof points, today's benchmark for laptops is about a 20-watt processor. We'll be bringing out some much smaller ones next year. That means smaller, cost reduction. They'll run in the 2-watt level, but power managed so aggressively that the average user will think they're running at milliwatts, yet they'll perform like today's laptops do. And that'll be the start of a whole new family, Silverphone. These will go into some handheld devices, but they'll go into many of the smaller form factor laptops. Along with that lower power, the fan goes away in many of these, particularly in the education. You get more rugged. Everything becomes basically solid state other than the disk. Some of those disks can be solid state in flash. And so this power reduction keeps going. And if you look at our technology, historically, we used shrink capacities more and more and more for building bigger chips, more performance, consuming more power. Going forward, what that means with laptops is you go from the 20-watt level down to the 2-watt level, goes below that. Use that technology for lowering the power in the systems, getting the power down, the longer battery life, the all-day battery life that people need, and put that effort that way rather than just increasing performance at the expense of anything. So power becomes absolutely critical for us in this roadmap. Now, if you look at schools, I want to benchmark you on a couple of capabilities here because I spend a lot of time in education as well as digital divide areas. And if you look at the schools, there's really 3 steps in this. And the comment earlier about more kids leaving school in the next 30 years than in the history, I think is absolutely key because every country realizes that. How do the next billion kids compete for the next less than 1 billion jobs that are going to be around? And so the education is absolutely key. In this, you see many, many countries have suddenly realized that every school needs a lab. I've had people working recently in countries like Libya, all over Africa, where installations of, in many cases, 100,000 computers, the latest, into labs in every school is becoming standard. UK is ahead of that, and so are the emerging markets, but not a lot ahead of that. The biggest push is in laptops for teachers. I've just spent a couple of days in Guatemala with the 15 countries from Northern Cone, Latin America, Central America, Caribbean, and I'd say half of them have a laptop for every teacher program, subsidized by the government, subsidized by all sorts of mechanisms. And I came back from Portugal yesterday where the 3G licenses that Portugal Telecom would have paid to the government are actually being used to subsidize laptops for teachers, students, and poor people. So in Portugal, many of the education system is looking at €150 Core 2 Duo latest type laptops because they're subsidized by the 3G license things that the money would have gone to the government. The government said, no, pay it on the computers. And so many, many countries are absolutely driving this. In the ubiquitous education, and you see this in UK, did the Teachers Laptop Program about 4 years ago. That kind of gives you an idea of the lead versus developing marketplaces. But as the China group said, earlier presentation, lots of people in China, lots of people in India, they're moving quickly as well. If you look at the one-on-one education, we brought out a device called Classmate. That's being tested in about 30 developing countries at this point. That's for one-on-one with kids, where each school or each classroom has a computer. We're learning a tremendous amount from that. But that's where it's going. And it's hard to look at 2012, but I would certainly believe if you turn the clock forward 20 or 25 years, it's very hard to see that every one of the billion kids doesn't have some sort of computing device in school. How do we get the cost down? How do we get the capabilities up and kind of drive that? So that really is an enormous focus for us. And we'll be doing devices aimed totally at that marketplace. Full function laptops will obviously play the major role, but there will be some for different price points, different connectivity, different rugged ability that you start seeing coming in. And again, UK is one of the leading places in this. But I see best known methods in Australia, in US, I'll show you a video in a sec. Korea actually has a very nice system. I was just there a few weeks ago, where I think that makes a ton of sense. We try and look at a complete system rather than just, okay, we sell some chips. And we put programs in all of these areas, and you get to understand each of those. The teachers one is absolutely critical. There's 60 million teachers in the world. As I said, our training of 40 hours of teacher training to use a computer in the classroom has trained 4 million teachers. We say we'll do 10 million by 2011. What about the rest of them? We launched an online program for this just a couple of weeks ago, the Intel Teach Online. That program is moving around the world, and that will scale up in about the 40 countries it exists. We have Intel Teach here in UK. The professional development is critical, so programs around to encourage that. But I think if you ask me to say what does it look like by 2012, I think we have to look at a huge amount of those 60 million teachers professionally qualified, having computers at home with these programs, using computers in school, trained to use them, and the training is the key part here, so they can use them training in the classrooms. Digital curricula. You've been a leader in this. We have a program called School. We developed it in Ireland. It's been translated into Arabic and Spanish. I announced it in Portuguese yesterday in Portugal. You've probably got the most sophisticated website on this. That's going to grow, lots of content there. We provided maths and science. The Education Authority cranks that into the curricula, but you see that supplemented with all sorts of content, just like the folks from the BBC showed earlier. Technology, laptops are coming down in price, connections going up, power's coming down, and you're going to see a whole cadre of different laptops where you'll have the most basic ones for the most emerging markets, and the full capability ones like we use for business, because video is important, photography is important, images is important, creativity is important, and the basic laptops will be consumption machines, and the more capable ones, the full ones that we know, will be the creativity machines. And connection, I explained that piece, Wi-Fi, WiMAX, 3G embedded in these, or certainly 3G very cost effectively available, and the ability to roam across all of them becomes critical. If you look at this, it really brings you into one model that I think a number of the developed countries will lead in, and this is this anywhere access to learning. The kids want to do this in school, they want to do this at home, in the libraries, wherever they happen to go. You really learn wherever you are, just like many of us in business work wherever we are. And I think exactly the same applies to there. And the UK Online at Home is an absolutely critical program there for driving this. So we'll work very closely on this inside classroom, outside classroom, at home, connection and devices to make that piece prevalent and do everything we can to make that a successful program. But it's going to be anywhere access, multiple devices, lots of different capabilities on connection, and really many different content areas. What I'd like to do is just, again, a benchmark. I'll show you a video that we made in Henrico County in Virginia about 6 months ago. I think that's very much state of the art. I think if you benchmark UK, very similar type capabilities leading, but it gives you an idea about that kind of use of laptops, use of technology for learning that's happening. This happens to be in a secondary school in Virginia. It'll give you a flavor for that. Can you run the video, please?
I didn't even know how to check my email when I came here 4 years ago. And so I was very intimidated, but I knew I wanted to teach at this school. And so I just accepted that I was going to have to come up to the 21st century.
The keys to making technology integration successful really are to see technology as a tool, not as something to replace our job as educators in the classroom, but also to meet the unique learning styles of each student.
My job is to provide for the learning for all 47,000 of our students and to be sure that we have equal opportunity. So the notion is how do we ensure that the kids that have not had access to the technology would have an opportunity to do that, so there's a more level playing field.
At my old school we had computer labs where we had to take turns on having the internet and the computer and Word and everything, whereas here you have it right here on your laptop.
Like when I had to do research, I don't have to go to the library, go to a bookstore, just go on the internet, and then I have my information ready for my next project.
If I can quickly email a teacher when I'm sitting at home and get in touch with them to ask them a question, if I'm not stressing out and able to calmly get through an assignment, I think I do better.
You can't really think critically if all you do is take in information from a textbook. But if you can interact with the world through the computer and do things with the computer that you could not have done just sitting in the classroom, I think it's a really powerful way to help students learn.
Not only does it open up the world for my students, but it opens up the world for me. And I can learn so many great things as a teacher.
I think I've become a better teacher. I've learned to meet the needs of the students where they are, as well as to kind of see how they learn in different ways and to modify my instruction in order to meet their needs and help them to be successful.
Over the first 4 years of the project, our standardized test scores went up. In each of the grade levels, middle and high school, our writing results got better. Our attendance got better. Our dropout rates went down.
I will tell you that there are moments when I sit in my teachers' classrooms and I just reel backwards and am blown away by what I see, and I think I would have never been able to do that, and these kids would have never been able to do that if we didn't have these computers in front of us.
Makes your classroom so much better, so much more engaging. And that is what we have to do with kids today. We have to engage them.
It will transform your classrooms. You got to do it because it's the right thing to do for kids.
I think that captures the heart of the message I was trying to bring across here. One is, I think the heart of this is professional development of the teachers. They're at the center of this. That's where we spend a tremendous amount of effort. The second one you saw was a tremendous amount of content there. Mobility is assumed. The devices are assumed. You have to be able to use them everywhere. They have to be rugged. They have to be cost effective. They have to be powerful enough to take care of some of the multimedia needs up there. I think one other aspect I didn't bring out, did you see the use of some of the computers there being used with disadvantaged students? I think that's a critical one going forward as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got our question catching person. It's over there. It moves around a bit.
Hello, I'm Eileen O'Connor from the Radiation Research Trust. The question I have is, I have real concerns about the technology, and it would be great if we could move forward and if it was safe. But I have very grave doubts that it's not safe, because I developed breast cancer after long-term exposure to a mobile phone mast and now live in a cancer cluster. There are many other cancer clusters, and there's been medical studies by doctors in Germany and Israel that have also shown cancer clusters around phone masts.
I don't want to interrupt because the leaflets are there. What I wanted to question.
Wi-Fi is similar to mobile phone mast radiation, and should we be promoting this in our schools, knowing that our children are the most vulnerable, and also knowing that there's been a top European Environmental Agency calling for a reduction in the use of Wi-Fi? Does it make sense? And can our friend from Samsung help us? You asked for questions for help. Could you please help the people who are suffering from cancer now and people who are suffering from electrosensitivity? And these people are challenged today, and it could be a growing crisis.
John, do you want to answer that?
Well, it's actually a very good question, but it's a very tough one for a technology company to answer. It's a policy, both policy and technology and medical. I don't actually feel qualified. I can see what we try to do, and that's to lower the power in these radios as best as we can, consistent with transmission of spectrum and getting signals from A to B, which is required. So we try and take that out. We try and make that as consistent as we can with any country's policy. We follow all the standards, the spectrum standards. I can tell you that, but your medical question, there's many like that I actually don't feel qualified to answer.
Thanks. And do you want to chuck one question? Do you want to just chuck the puck onto somebody else and see if they can catch it? That would be fab. Thanks. And I think it's fallen closest to you if you'd like to ask away.
Okay, thank you. I suppose my question around handheld learning is kind of an interesting one. I'm a traditional book publisher, okay, and I've been publishing books for the last 15 years. And I just wondered if any on the panel would have an idea of, I saw for the first time when the book could actually disappear when I saw kids using a handheld, and I just wondered if the panel had any views on whether you felt that was the case or whether you felt that and if so, would that be by 2012 or 2020 or 2050?
Okay, I'm going to ask John for a quick opinion on that, and then we're going to come to the panel session right at the end.
First of all, I think there's nothing better than a good book in many ways. On the same time, if you look at this, I think Google digitizes, am I accurate here, about 30,000 pages a day? I may be 0 off on that one, but it's a very huge number. So you can see some of this digitization of content. It's what we encourage a tremendous amount, by the way. You see it with school, and we've integrated that. We go out, spend a lot of our time with software engineers encouraging that. So we're clearly going that way very quickly. My youngest son, my baby, I guess, is 25 now, and I watch him spend about $800 just to get his books for this round of college semester, and he came home with about this many, and I've given him his laptop, and I know what he would like to do there, but they'll coexist, digitization and lap at an increasing rate, and it is. I just think that's the direction.
And that is a really interesting question we may stray back to later on about where narrative lies in the end with all this, because books for information, one thing, books for narrative. There's a fascinating debate running through the cinema industry at the moment about the death of cinema when it just replicates books and the beginning of a whole new form of narrative, and I'm sure that applies to